Alright, which phone should you pick for their best all-round performance? We'll definitely be comparing the camera, and that's naturally one of the most crucial elements of a modern flagship. Resuming all the way in to 20 times from great distance in low light, we have the latest and greatest from the two major manufacturers, the iPhone 17 Pro Max and the Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra, the Xiaomi 17 Ultra, the Vivo X300 Pro, the Oppo Find X9 Pro and the Honor Magic 8 Pro. We'll be telling you which phone took which video and photos later on in this video, so get ready for this half-hour-long video. We'll be pushing them to the absolute limit for sure. Hey everyone, Ray here. You're right, we've just released a video about the Vivo X300 Ultra, which we'll definitely be including in our upcoming comparison videos. Now, if you're interested in more videos like these, subscribing to my channel is always appreciated. And just as usual, this is not a voiceover done by AI, so every verdict we're making today will be totally based on my personal experience. Now, we have one very important flagship missing today, which is Sony's latest Xperia. We should be looking at around late May to June if they're sticking with their previous launch window. Now, the camera alone wouldn't make the perfect phone, so naturally we're going beyond that. We have a battery drain test, draining it from 100 all the way down to 0, the AI features, thermal management and sustained performance. So due to time constraint, we might not be able to cover them all in one single video here. Be sure to stay tuned for future updates. Right, let's get started. The most anticipated part is definitely going to be the camera. For this comparison, we've included both photos and video tests from daylight, low light, long-range zoom, portraits, low-light portraits, and concert scenarios. Now, it would be a great mistake for me to overlook two major technology breakthroughs here before all the comparisons. And what we're looking at here is the anti-reflective coating on the Galaxy S26 Ultra and the iPhone 17 Pro Max. Nothing's new here, though the Galaxy and the iPhone are the only two models here that feature a coating of this kind. Now, privacy display on the Galaxy S26 Ultra. That's huge, and here's how it looks like turning on privacy display and before and after toggling on maximum privacy, compared to nothing at all, which is a normal display. Now, the award-winning part is that it can be activated automatically. As you can see here, it's activated once I've jumped into WhatsApp or in fact any other app. And here's how it will look like if you're watching a video and a notification pops up. I must say, a really smart integration of the technology and hardware through software. Now, Xiaomi's turn. They've actually brought something new to the table as well this time around, and that's about the camera. We're looking at the 1-inch sensor for the main camera with low-fit technology. What it actually does in real life is that it captures much more light and has a much higher capacity in doing that. And as a result, we're looking at images and videos in particular, with much more details in the highlights area. Extreme bright light, firework, which would be really difficult for a smartphone to capture through videos. Now, even if I used a proper top-tier flagship, which is actually pretty good in recording videos, on the right, now the Xiaomi 17 Ultra is actually totally on another level. Now, Leica's touch, in my opinion, is absolutely beyond a simple color filter. What it does in my experience is that it's actually turning it almost to a DSLR or mirrorless camera. Now, if we take a closer look here, we have Leica Vibrant and Leica Authentic, and by toggling on and off HDR, we've got 4 different look and feel and light rendering from the start. And in my opinion, Leica Authentic works really well with HDR off. That could be the major reason for anyone to get the Xiaomi Leica phone if you're into that look. Alright, back to the main focus of this video, a comparison between these 6 really great phones. Now, in this comparison, we'll be using full auto mode for the sake of recreating what most people could be doing in their daily lives. Now here on the Galaxy, we have a 200 megapixels main camera, a 10 megapixels 3x telephoto lens, which we won't be looking into, and a 5x 50 megapixels telephoto lens. The major upgrade for Team Galaxy would be a wider aperture for the main and the 5x telephoto camera. That's a whopping f1.4 aperture for the main camera, and that's really wide, and f2.9 aperture for the telephoto camera, jumping from f3.4 from last year. Now, I've actually noticed they've done a total rework on the telephoto camera here, as we are seeing round bokeh effect here. All the bokeh balls here around. compared to the square-shaped bokeh effect on the periscope telephoto lens on the S25 Ultra from last year. That's a huge bonus for photography enthusiasts. And a 50-megapixel ultra-wide lens. Now, how does it compare to the iPhone, and of course to the more camera-oriented camera flagships? Right, the three phones here, which I'm holding on my right-hand side, they actually feature a similar 200 megapixels 1/1.4-inch sensor for the telephoto camera, and both Vivo and Honor decided to pair it up with an 85mm lens. While here on the Xiaomi 17 Pro Max, the telephoto lens can actually be delicately zoomed across 75mm to 100mm. That's not a whole lot, though it's actually the longest focal length I've seen on any smartphone with a 200 megapixels sensor from Samsung actually. And last but not least, we have a 200 megapixels telephoto camera here on the Oppo Find X9 Pro as well, with a 70mm lens. Now, the Ultra variant of this phone should be around really soon. Until then, we're not digging really deep into it. Okay, the first round of the test will be doing a quality check on the high-res mode, 200 megapixels mode, whatever they're naming it. Now, the major reason for us to do this is to get a greater idea of how the lens actually perform and possibly dealing with less algorithms and AI stuffs. Now, can we still call it a fair comparison as we are looking at 200 megapixels images from the Galaxy compared to 50 megapixels images from the Honor, Xiaomi, Vivo and Oppo, and 48 megapixels images from the iPhone. And that's on the main camera. Now, we're not spending a whole decade talking about 200 megapixels output, so we have a solid winner here. The Galaxy S26 Ultra definitely took the crown. I must say, the 200 megapixels sensor here is working on the main sensor here on the Galaxy. Now, we'll be having just one more set of comparison photos using maximum resolution output, just to make sure we're giving everyone a second chance. Right, here we have the Oppo Find X9 Pro, iPhone 17 Pro Max, Galaxy S26 Ultra and the Honor Measure 8 Pro. The Galaxy is the clear winner here. Time for the telephoto camera. Is it going to be the other way around as we're looking at a 50 megapixels telephoto camera here on the Galaxy, while we're actually dealing with a much larger sensor with more megapixels count across the camera-oriented camera flagships? Now, the unfair test is here again. We're comparing 200 megapixels images to 50 megapixels images. Right, here we have the Vivo, the iPhone, the Galaxy and the Xiaomi. The telephoto king is the Xiaomi 17 Ultra at the moment. To me, it totally makes sense as they've given the 200 megapixels sensor a lens with a longer focal length. Now, the closest runner-up goes to, we're actually getting really similar results across the Vivo X300 Pro and the Honor Measure 8 Pro. And believe it or not, the Galaxy is actually performing really well here. In fact, to me, it's more like 98 to 99% of that on the Vivo and the Honor, and maybe 97% of that of the Xiaomi 17 Ultra. This could be due to Samsung's actually utilizing a lens with a longer focal length that's all the way up to 115mm, longest of them all, compared to 85mm on the Vivo and the Honor. So we're ending up with really close level of details across the board. And now we're having the last set of comparison photo using maximum resolution output, giving everyone a third chance. Who's got the most amount of details captured? The Xiaomi 17 Ultras took the crown again, marginally beating the Vivo and the Honor. Now, the Galaxy actually can be still considered as on the same league, not lagging behind at all. Now, the Oppo's actually doing really well as well, slightly behind the Galaxy if we take away the sharpening effect. So at their native focal length, they're actually performing more similarly than I thought it would be, so we're not calling it a day for sure. Alright, moments of truth. For sure, we'll be testing out long-range zoom capabilities, zooming all the way in to 50x this time around, revealing details on the statue there. At the same time, we'll be comparing light and color rendering across the board. Now, in terms of colors and HDR effect, it's not difficult to see that the photo taken by the Honor's a bit more saturated with more effective HDR effect. The Galaxy is actually doing quite similarly in terms of HDR effect. Vivo's also taken a similar route here for the X300 Pro, delivering bright shadows and well-controlled highlights. Colors are a little bit more saturated compared to the Galaxy as well. Last but not least, the Oppo, Xiaomi and iPhone are implementing less aggressive HDR effect here for this particular shot. And before the AI stuff kicks in at 10x zoom, details retention is actually quite similar across the board. Though I do see there's a little bit more details out of the photos taken with the Honor Measure 8 Pro. In the meantime, as for the Galaxy, the level of detail even at 20x and 50x, it actually outperforms the Oppo Find X9 Pro and the iPhone 17 Pro Max. On the contrary, the photos here shot on the Vivo, the Xiaomi 17 Ultra and the Honor are generally sharper and cleaner at high level zoom. Now at 20x, 50x zoom, if we take a closer look staring at the details here on the photos shot on the Xiaomi 17 Ultra, it will be a little bit more natural and cleaner, sharper than that on the Vivo X300 Pro. So the winner of this round goes to the Xiaomi 17 Ultra, though that's just by a slight margin. It's worth mentioning, however, there's a toggleable AI mode here on the Xiaomi 17 Ultra, the Oppo Find X9 Pro and the Honor Measure 8 Pro for anything above 20x. In my opinion, however, it's reasonable for the Xiaomi, the Vivo and the Honor to excel in long-range zoom, as they do have a high-resolution sensor paired up with a lens with 85mm or even up to 100mm field of view. While here, we're actually looking at 6 quite different color tones. Here on the Vivo, it appears to be slightly leaning towards cooler tones, while the city landscape appears to be a little bit on the reddish side, and slightly elevated color saturation for a more pleasing looking photo. That's normal practice for them. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, the photo taken with the Xiaomi actually has lower saturation, with higher contrast. It also gives that sort of teal green look when it comes to the blue color, which in my opinion is got a film vibe to it. Now, it would be totally unfair if we skip the color profiles and color filter here on the Vivo X300 Pro, the Hasselblad filters here on the Oppo Find X9 Pro, or the photographic styles here on the iPhone and the Galaxy as well. They do have their own color science. Oh, the Honor as well for sure. Now back to zoom quality. At 20x, with a little bit of help from the algorithms, you will be having the most amount of details out of the Xiaomi 17 Ultra again. Now, the Vivo's actually delivering level of details that's almost on a par with the Xiaomi. The Galaxy is not far behind as well. And apart from zoom, I do notice there's a slight boost in color saturation on the Oppo Find X9 Pro, despite they're doing a really great job in delivering accurate, true-to-life colors and white balance. And at 20 times zoom, with a field of view of about 400 to 500mm, we are getting really similar level of details and sharpness across the Oppo, Vivo, Honor, Galaxy and the Xiaomi. Now that's for city landscape and architecture photography, where the AI and algorithms could be playing a major role there. Now this time around, we'll be pointing the cameras directly towards the light source area. In a moment, we'll be zooming all the way into the balloon there in the middle of a frame. While the balloon doesn't come with that much of complex texture for sure, so the creases, the refraction and the reflection of light in such a backlight situation, it would be a total nightmare for any phone to render the light properly in such a condition. Now, I'm genuinely impressed by the photo shot on the Xiaomi 17 Ultra here. It actually comes with vibrant colors and natural-looking light rendering. Now, HDR here is effective, though not overly done. Now, the Galaxy shows a clear boost in sharpening, resulting in a much sharper image, though it can sometimes look a bit over-sharpened. While in terms of the actual level of details, the Galaxy, the Honor Measure 8 Pro, the Vivo, and the Xiaomi itself are all quite similar. Now, the Oppo and the iPhone's marginally behind, though not by a huge margin. Next up, we'll compare wildlife photography. We should be looking at more about the quality of the lens and the camera performance itself more than the AI, as it should be reasonable to assume it would be really challenging for any phone to implement significant AI boost when it comes to filming subjects that constantly move across the frame. At 20x, I do see the contrast would be much higher on the shot taken with the Vivo and the Xiaomi, which would definitely be more pleasing on social media. However, if we're talking only about the level of details, even when we've crossed into the 30x territory, the four phones here actually performed relatively similarly. Even if it's all the way up to 50x, now it's limited to 40x here on the iPhone. I must say it's not a day and night difference, so thanks to the algorithm, the shot taken with the Vivo and the Xiaomi, possibly the Galaxy as well. Now, in my opinion, the texture here on the Galaxy could look a bit over-sharpened, though the one shot on the Xiaomi is actually very compelling and really impressive. They've got a bit of help from the AI and algorithms, though it's not overly sharpened and overly artificial. Right turn for the Oppo and the Honor, all of them's actually performing more similarly than I thought it would be, even for wildlife photography, and we're actually zooming all the way to 50x from great distance. So that's under broad daylight, so the actual battleground could actually be in low light. Just one extra round of comparison for zoom quality under broad daylight. Now we should be looking at much greater differences this time around. At 10x and 8x on the iPhone, it would be within the lossless zoom range. The interesting bit here is that the photo shot on the Galaxy, the Vivo and the Xiaomi do appear to be sharper than that on the iPhone. It could be a combination of both hardware and software. It's easy to tell Vivo's implementing more aggressive telephoto enhancement in order to elevate the skin texture here and the overall sharpness of the image. Now at 20x, the Galaxy is actually still very close to the top, with arguably more natural-looking texture. However, when it comes to the overall image quality, including light rendering, from 10x, 20x all the way to 50, now it might totally be depending on personal preference. In my opinion, the photos shot on the Vivo and the Xiaomi do look a bit sharper and cleaner, while the skin texture on the Xiaomi would be slightly more natural compared to the Vivo, while the one shot on the Galaxy could be a great balance between perceivable level of details and the cleanness of the photo overall. Now it's worth mentioning here's a little surprise here on the Honor Major 8 Pro. At 10x, not much of a difference, though at 20, I was totally shocked by how similar the image shot on the Galaxy and the Honor actually looked like. They actually have a really great representation of how the texture actually is in real life. Photos look sharp and not artificial here for this particular shot. Now, zoom quality isn't going to be the major reason for us to pick the Oppo and the iPhone, especially we're using the Oppo alone without the teleconverter here. And for sure, they do have their own strength. Alright, moving on to low-light photography. You're right, it wouldn't be a meaningful test if we're zooming 100x all the way to the moon. So this time around we'll be zooming in just enough to reveal the details on the full moon, while retaining the city landscape in the same frame. And here's how it looks like at 1x, and right, the iPhone's still suffering from the lens flare and reflection issue. On the contrary, the night sky here on the Vivo X300 Pro appears to be even brighter than it actually was, and it also comes with a slightly bluish tint to it. Now that's a software processing which can be turned on and off. However, the color saturation here definitely looks sharper than the rest of the competition, and right now you're looking at a photo shot on the native focal length on the telephoto lens on each of them. Not much of a difference here, despite being shot in low light. There's adequate light source from the city landscape and the bridge itself. Now, if we really have to nitpick it, the shot taken with the iPhone 17 Pro Max appears to be slightly softer than the one shot on the Galaxy and the Honor here, and noise reduction appears to be slightly less effective here on the Oppo. Oh, and back to 1x, the photo here on the Galaxy actually looks bright and clean, thanks to the larger aperture on the main camera and the telephoto camera this year, while color saturation's also boosted here on the shot taken with the Honor Major 8 Pro, similar to what we've got on the Vivo X300 Pro. And speaking of the Vivo, as we've done a couple of comparisons before, we can basically confirm the camera ISP here tends to boost color saturations, and they are doing a really great job in reducing digital noise. Just like here, it's got the brightest image out of a bunch, so if we take a really close look here, the level of detail is actually surprisingly close among the Vivo, the Galaxy and the Xiaomi 17 Ultra, and that actually extends to the Honor Major 8 Pro as well. While the text and the fine details here on the Oppo Find X9 Pro appears to be slightly softer compared to the Galaxy, the Honor, Vivo and Xiaomi, the 5 of them here actually performed almost identically in these kind of extreme low-light scenes. Now we're using the native focal length of the telephoto camera on all of them here again, not pushing it to the absolute limit this time around. Right, I'm sort of expecting a little bit more from the iPhone 17 Pro Max, as here on the Galaxy, despite the sensor size here is slightly smaller than the rest of the competition if we're comparing it to the Xiaomi, the Vivo and the Honor, and the Oppo as well. So thanks to the wider aperture this time around and the longer focal length compared to the rest of the competition, it's actually got the most amount of details here on the red ribbon, while the entire image is also one of the sharpest. Here we've come to the ultimate comparison when it comes to long-range zoom portrait photography and videography. Which phone should you take to your next concert? Now we're actually zooming all the way in to 20 times from here. The Vivo and the Xiaomi actually allow us to zoom in all the way up to 30 times. Well, we can actually do that all the way up to 25 times on the Galaxy, 24x on the iPhone, while here on the Oppo Find X9 Pro we can do that up to 18 times and 15x zoom on the Honor Measure 8 Pro. In terms of the actual level of details, however, it's actually pretty similar across the iPhone 17 Pro Max, the Oppo and the Honor. While we are getting a much cleaner and sharper footage out of the Vivo X300 Pro, possibly due to the dedicated VS1 camera image processing chip, while we're getting really similar level of details across the Galaxy S26 Ultra as well as the Xiaomi 17 Ultra this time around. Now, the iPhone's actually doing pretty good in capturing all the details, so noise reduction could be better. And finally, the Oppo and the Honor, they are limiting the field of view we're able to get, so they're actually able to deliver basically the same level of details the iPhone's able to capture for videos. Right, that's indeed for video recording. Once we've switched to photo mode, especially we do have a stage mode on the Vivo, the Xiaomi, Oppo and Honor. Now, as we're sitting slightly further away from the stage this time around, the photo does look a bit softer on the iPhone. On the contrary, we are getting a sharper image from the Vivo and the Xiaomi. Now, the photo shot on the Galaxy does look a bit softer compared to the Vivo and the Xiaomi, so that might also be depending on personal preference, as that definitely looks a little bit less digitally processed. So if we really have to rank them, the best phone for concert photography and videography would be the Vivo X300 Pro and the Galaxy S26 Ultra. The Galaxy is delivering more true-to-life colors and contrast, while Vivo and Honor is definitely putting much more effort in bringing up the sharpness of the image. Now, the Oppo Find X9 Pro is actually doing really well in balancing the light, though without the teleconverter, the photos could look a bit softer than that of the Vivo X300 Pro, the Galaxy and the Xiaomi. Now we've tried capturing a stage from great distance, what about portrait photography? Now let's dive right into some of the most challenging scenes. We're basically pointing the phones directly towards the sunset, while I was basically facing the shadows area. Now it's kind of as expected that the Oppo, Honor, Xiaomi and Vivo delivered a well-balanced photo, brightened up my skin tone. Now the Galaxy here this time around actually delivered a much brighter image than I thought it would be. This time around, there's a minor issue, though I must point out that here on the Oppo Find X9 Pro, HDR seems to be not working perfectly well every time if you've got timer turned on for a group photo. It seems to me that it prioritizes brightening up my skin tone, though it kind of misses out the details from the highlight. And right, we're not pointing the phone directly towards the sun this time around, so the yellow paint here actually reflected the light pretty effectively. So now we can draw the conclusion when it comes to light balancing and skin tone rendering. Just as usual, Vivo is putting the most effort in brightening up my skin tone and everything else in the shadows area. Now, Samsung's doing a really great job in balancing the light this time around. Now, I personally do prefer the photo shot on the Xiaomi. It's just got that extra bit of depth to it when it comes to light rendering. In the meantime, Honor's doing a really great job this time around in color reproduction and skin tone rendering. Now let's switch to the telephoto lens and do a quick comparison for edge detection and bokeh rendering. As usual, let's dive right into the most challenging scenes possible. Right, it's like each strand of my hair and the glasses from the side are all rendered perfectly on all of them, even when I stood a few more meters away from the phone, which could be more challenging for the phone to detect the subject and separate it from the background. Moving on to low-light portrait, there's one thing that's worth mentioning. We're finally getting portrait with flash here on the Xiaomi 17 Ultra. So basically we're getting the same kind of experience on all of them, except here on the Honor Measure 8 Pro. We do have flash support for portrait mode here, though we will be losing the bokeh effect by doing so. Now, I don't normally use a flash in outdoor at night, though I must say there's a clear winner here, the Vivo X300 Pro. While here, the improvement on the Xiaomi is actually huge compared to their last generation. They didn't even have flash for portrait photography last year. On the contrary, the skin tone here on the Galaxy is actually the most accurate out of the 6 phones. Speaking of accurate colors, we have to give a big applause to the Honor Measure 8 Pro. Despite we're losing the bokeh effect here with the flash, though the skin tone and the colors on the background there on the highlight and the night sky, it's a great photo overall. And here we have a low-light portrait using the telephoto lens, which would be a nightmare for most phones due to the smaller sensor on the telephoto camera. Massive improvement here on the Galaxy using the 5x telephoto camera. Now both the wider aperture and the next generation of camera ISP could be contributing to the better results here. Though I have to admit, I do prefer the photos shot on here, the Oppo, Vivo, Xiaomi and Honor this time around. Alright, it's been almost 25 minutes, really appreciate it. And right here, we're pushing it to the absolute limit. So basically, we have a bright highlight here on the bridge which could be easily overexposed by previous generation of phones. The reflection of the red color from the bridge on the water surface, me in the shadow backlight area, and the night sky there. Possibly due to the wider aperture this time around on the Galaxy on the main camera, as well as the higher megapixels count, we do have significantly more details captured by the Galaxy in the night sky. And once again, thumbs up Honor, they are doing a really great job this time around in terms of color reproduction. It's been a really extensive comparison this time around, so I reckon you might have already got a comprehensive idea of which phone's going to be your next camera phone. And here we have a final round of extreme long-range zoom comparison, zooming all the way to 100x all the way to the other side of the harbor. Now in a moment we will be zooming into the building in the middle of the frame. As you can see here, there's a billboard, and we will be revealing the details of it. And here's a look at 5x, 10x, all 6 of them doing an exceptionally great job in retaining all the details from a highlight while keeping the shadows area bright enough. And at 20x, I do notice the photos taken with the Vivo, the Galaxy and the Xiaomi, the Honor as well, would be sharper than that on the iPhone. Now we can actually see the name of this building from really great distance. And there's one more important aspect for a great photo. As you can see here, apart from the details, the photo in general do look a bit more natural here on the Galaxy, the Honor and the Xiaomi compared to the Oppo and the Vivo, though you might argue that the photo taken with the Vivo X300 Pro does look sharper and cleaner thanks to the more pronounced sharpening and noise reduction effect. Now all in all, even at 100x, the Vivo, Honor and Xiaomi are the absolute best 3 at the moment. The Galaxy's really close and the Oppo's really close as well. When it comes to the Android devices here, we may conclude zoom capabilities may only be one of the major deciding factors, and not the only one, as we're getting relatively similar level of details and texture rendering from 5x, 10x, 20, 30, 50, even all the way up to 100. What is the deciding factor in my opinion when it comes to the camera? It will be how they see, render and recreate the lights and colors. Now, just before we put this video to an end, here we've got quite a few more sets of photos. We've got photos shot on the ultra-wide, the main camera and the telephoto camera, from low light to daytime and back to low light. And ultimately, we will be having one more set of extreme zoom tests just to wrap things up. It's been a really long video this time around, so we won't be having a specific conclusion. What we will be having soon would be a battery drain test, and that would be including AI features comparison and thermal management. Be sure to stay tuned for that. See you all next time.
What?